Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryang Karavavahe Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So Arjuna's mind lacks the necessary qualifications. Owing to those qualifications being absent, has denied him from permanently holding this vision called Vishwarupa in his mind. Now you say, well, what are these qualifications that he was lacking? These qualifications in the Tattvabodha we called sadhana chatushtaya, the two primary ones. So what is viveka? It is discrimination or discernment between nitya and anitya. If you remember, we said nitya anitya vastu viveka kaha. And then we said nitya vastu ekam brahma. In other words, the one Brahman is nityam, is permanent. Everything else, in other words, other than that is anitya, impermanent. So this is the basic qualification that a Vedantan needs in order to start to appreciate that all that I see is the one cause. And not just intelligent, no, it's the one cause, okay, it's all appearing as Ishvara. So it's a different order between intellectual and the actual direct knowledge. So when we say direct knowledge, what leads to that direct knowledge? First qualification, viveka. I need to discern between the permanent and the impermanent, the changing and the unchanging. As Kritika was saying, what is unchanging? Now we can use the word the self. This means the presence that I always am, self-evident to myself, Atma. The second qualification is vairaga, vairagaha. Now, this was not a problem for Arjuna, by the way. He had lots of vairagya. This is this passion. In fact, that's what caused him to say, hey, Krishna, I want to leave this battlefield because whether I win this war or don't win this war, I'm still not going to be happy. So this means Arjuna had no problem with this passion. And what is this passion? It is the absence of desire for enjoyment in this world that is now and in the future. That is, whether you're talking heaven or whether you're talking about 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years. Now, when I say absence of desire, the mind is now going to start to generalize, go, okay, so I'm not allowed to enjoy myself. I'm not allowed to smile. You know, all of this is just, you know, not this passion. We're saying enjoy yourself, but never spend the entire life just enjoying in artha and kama. This means in pleasure and in wealth. So this means throughout my interactions, I use viveka and I use vairagya, this passion. What is this passion? My understanding is that all that I see is fleeting. It will come to an end eventually. For that reason, I do not get too invested or too involved in it, because by its ending, it's then going to pull me down right with it. Okay, what else is vairagyam? It means objectivity. What is objectivity? Or I understand the world according to the knowledge of the Shastra instead of my own biases. So you say, how do I build objectivity? How do I see what is instead of superimposing them with my own biases? The answer is, the more you are reading the Shastra, contemplating on the Shastric principles, concepts, seeing the world according to the Shastra, the more you can be objective. So there's no one single technique to be objective. It is really just the study of the scriptures that makes you objective. And this takes time. So without these qualifications that I just spoke about, that is viveka and vairagyam, what happens? The enthusiastic mind that was initially in its honeymoon, as was Arjuna's, it quickly recedes back to its original habitual way of thinking. So this means the mind, which was previously attracted to whatever object, now suddenly finds or loses interest in that very object. So this means one object was giving me the honeymoon. What was giving Arjuna the honeymoon? Vishwarupa darshanam. That very object that was giving him the honeymoon now suddenly becomes the object of distaste, displeasure. I lost my composure. Why? Because the mind that was looking at it has not done the necessary work prior to receiving the Divya Chakshuhu. So this is just like when a kid asks, hey daddy, hey mommy, give me, I want some also, whatever it is. And then you give them that object, and then they kind of, work with it and they're all happy. Within 5-10 minutes, they throw it away. It's like a new object now. So in the same way, because the mind that handled it was not prepared to accept it and see it for what it actually is meant for. Therefore, it starts to now get turned off by that very object. This is why no honeymoon lasts, because the habitual ways come back. Okay, and why else has Arjuna lost this Vishwarupa? Because he said, please take away this object. I asked for it enthusiastically, and now please take away that very same object that I was so enthusiastic about. Because Arjuna refused to accept the totality in the aspect of decay and destruction. In other words, he was gladly, enthusiastically accepting sustenance and birth, but when it came to destruction and decay, then he said, I don't want to see, I want to take part in this. So what is a mature mind? It accepts all three aspects: birth, sustenance, and destruction. In fact, the destruction principle is the very principle that keeps you healthy. All the diseases get destroyed. All of the ignorance gets destroyed. All of the old habits get destroyed. So destruction is something to accept, to embrace, if you start to really think about how necessary it is to the total vision of life. Again, because of Arjuna's unpreparedness, what happened? He asked Krishna, please withdraw this vision back to your comfortable, what's called Ishta Deva, the personal deity with whom I am comfortable. So let's see what happens. Verse 48. Naveda yajna dhayanair nadanaihi nachakriya bhirnatapo bhirugraihi evam rupa shakya aham nirloke drashtum twadanyena kuru pravira.
Not by the study of the Vedas and rituals, not by charity, not by performing rituals, nor by severe austerities can I, in this form, be seen in the world of men by anyone other than you, Arjuna, the bravest of the Kurus.
Continue.
I, in this form, cannot be seen. The sense organs have their limitations, so they cannot encompass the entire cosmic form. Each sense organ can only grasp a given sense object. Eyes can register form and color, ears can perceive only sounds, and so on. And all these also have a limited range. Beyond that, they have no scope. Even your imagination is something dependent entirely upon your sensory perception. You cannot stretch it to cover the cosmic form. That is why it is frightening to Arjuna. Of course, it was thrilling, but at the same time so frightening because of the destruction he saw.
Krishna is pointing out that bhakti, which we will now cover from 48 to 55, the sadhana, which ultimately leads to permanent Vishwarupa appreciation. And to bring the effectiveness of bhakti, that means to demonstrate how it is significant, if you read the verse, it seems that Krishna is doing it at the expense of calling other sadhanas inferior. For example, he says, not by the study of the Vedas, not by rituals, not by charity, not by performing rituals, not by serving austerities. So now the mind's going to think, are they useless? No. However, in the context of what Arjuna has already heard in the previous chapters, what Krishna is doing, he's simply bringing out the importance of bhakti. So in reality, all sadhanas, including the ones that I just mentioned, they're all equally significant. It just depends on what stage the person is at in their life. So we cannot now discard the study of this, Vedas and rituals and austerities. It has its use, it has its validity. But up to where Arjuna is right now Krishna can say, all of these ones that you have already done, that I've already talked about in chapter 4, 5, and 3, now I want to talk about bhakti. Therefore, bhakti is the most effective sadhana for Vishwarupa. For example, in chapter 4, it talks about 12 yajnas. One of the yajnas is Vrata yajna. And that involves taking special vows, which helps sharpen the mind and the senses. Then we have Swadhyaya yajna. This is reading or studying the scriptures, chanting mantras, and doing introspection. Then we have pranayama yajna. This is controlling the inhale and the exhale. We have ahara yajna. This is offering the right food in the right quantity to the digestive fire. We have yoga yajna. This is the 8-step process in chapter 6. Yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. Then we have dravya yajna. This is social service and charity. Now, can you say any one of these 12 that I just mentioned, I haven't mentioned all of them, that they're useless? No. Okay, so obviously they have their extreme importance depending for where the person is. A person finds a lot of pleasure doing service for the community. That's why you have, today the cleanup acts, like clean the beaches and clean the forests. So this is, you cannot say, you're wasting your time. So for them, it is valid. So this is not about insulting or putting up or down anyone's path, because they're doing what's called swadharma. It matters to them. Also in the Taittiriya Upanishad, it says that the most effective sadhana for spiritual growth is study and sharing scriptural knowledge. But here, Krishna is seemingly saying that all of these sadhanas, including what the Taittiriya Upanishad is saying, is useless in blessing Vishwarupa Darshanam except bhakti. So how do you reconcile this? The fact that different scriptures are saying different things, as I said, to stress the importance of any particular subject matter, what the scriptures do is they contrast it against other sadhanas. And so you go, okay, so there's these sadhanas, rituals, austerities, tapas, and so on. And now there's bhakti. And now it's saying bhakti from all of these is the most important. And then what does it do to your mind? Okay, so let's pay attention to bhakti. So even Krishna, the Lord himself, will seem like he's apparently lying. And I can go up to Krishna and say, but wait a minute. The Taittiriya Upanishad says that studying scriptures is the most important. And now you're saying the bhakti is the most important. Which one's the most important? Do you even know what you're talking about? So this means it is not so black or white. You cannot say the person is lying or they're being dishonest. There is context for everything. And in this context, you can say bhakti by far is the most effective. So this is why we never say, but wait a minute, didn't you say that like 1 year ago or 3 months ago? And now you seem like contradicting yourself. No, because it was valid back then. And you understood it back then. Now it's time to move on. So I say something else. And then you understand this. And then I say something else, so on. So what is this bhakti that we're about to talk about? What is it referring to? It's talking about what's called Jijnatsu Bhakti. Now, what is Jijnatsu Bhakti? In chapter 7, verse 14 to 16, we talked about 4 types of bhakti, or 4 types of bhaktas. First one, if you remember. Now, you don't have to go to chapter 7, by the way, because I know some of us listen for the first time. So this is the beauty of the Gita. It's not like you need to go back and then revisit. Every time you come to a new chapter, we will reiterate, we will say what we've already said before. So it's not like person's not late and I should start from chapter 1. It's not like that with the Gita. The first one is Artaha Bhakta. What is an Artaha Bhakta? One who has bhakti only in crisis. When crisis comes, suddenly I think of the Lord. This means Lord is non-existent until I need him in my life. For example, suppose you discover you need to talk better, or I need better communication skills. I want to learn how to speak confidently. Suddenly Lord becomes number 1 in my life. So I pray to Lord. Now imagine Lord responds and says, I think what you need is Vishwarupa Darshanam. You don't need to speak in. It's all temporary, fleeting stuff. Are you going to be interested in Vishwarupa? No. In other words, and Artaha Bhakta is not interested in Vishvarupa. He or she is interested in what he or she is asking for, removal of a particular obstacle from life. So this means we cannot impose on someone who does not see the value of Vishvarupa. This is why I need to be patient with those who are not interested in the scriptures. The second is Artharthi Bhakta. This is a commercial Bhakta. You know, the one who says, yeah, it's okay, I will donate as long as Lord does, and then you fill in the blank. As long as he marries off my daughter, as long as he keeps providing me more customers in business, as long as I keep getting the customers, I will keep donating. So this is a business transaction Bhakta. Then you have a Jijnatsu Bhakta. This is whereby the sole desire is on Eka Rupa Ishwara Darshanam. Eka Rupa just means one form, that means Ishwara in one form. And this eventually leads to Vishwarupa. And Vishwarupa eventually leads to Moksha. So this means his whole purpose of living is to discover the nature of Ishwara. And then you have Jnani. Jnani we will cover in verse 54. Okay, so the summary of this verse 48 is, no amount of sophisticated Vedic rituals, no matter how much punya they're meant to provide, will give Vishwarupa Darshanam. Why? Because they also need to be followed up with vichara. Vichara means pondering upon, reflection, thinking about, considering into, inquiring into. This is self-inquiry. Mate vyatha macha vimudha bhavaha drishtva rupam ghoram idranmamedam vyapeta bhif manaf punastvam tadeva me rupam idam prapashya.
May you not have fear, and may you not be confused seeing this frightening form of mine. Being free from fear and pleased again, may you see that particular form of mine.
So here Krishna is withdrawing his form because Arjuna wants to see the relatable Ishtadeva, Krishna. Please give me your relatable form again, Krishna. My mind cannot bear this huge Vishwarupa where I don't know where's up, where's down, where's left, where's right. All around me, I see one Lord with a mouth, eating people, okay? So this means that the lack of qualifications, this is why Arjuna asked to withdraw the vision. So what does this mean? It means a lack of qualifications. And how does it manifest? In two ways. First, one's clarity or their epiphany is subject to coming and going. The lights turn on, then the lights turn off. Now I know, now I'm clear, now I'm not. So they go through this process of kind of like, yeah, I really got it today. And then next day, I'm not so sure. If this is the case, this is good news because this means the mind it's understanding, right? And it takes time for the mind to eventually come to this, quote, permanent place of understanding where there's no question of lights coming on and off. However, Arjuna is in a different position. Arjuna doesn't fully understand the meaning of Advaitam. And not understanding what Advaitam really means, this produces fear. For example, suppose someone says, I don't want the vision of Advaitam because I will no longer be interested in the world since everything will be the same. Everything will be non-dual, right? Everything will be one. But I cannot abandon my family, because I won't discern the difference between my family and a stranger anymore. So I'm going to hurt their feelings. For that reason, I am afraid of moksha. I won't have connection or memory to my old self, to my prior life, because the false person has died. And I don't want to die. I'll lose all my friends. There will be this ego death. Don't know what that means, but these are the kind of things that people carry in their heads, what Advaita means. And that in itself sabotages. Also, Paramarthananda, one of my teachers, one of his subjects came to him and said, Swami, I don't want moksha because I want to first go to Swargaloka and then I'll come back and then I'll do moksha. So I'm going to put moksha aside. So this is the kind of thinking that goes on when I don't understand what Advaitam really means. Now, what does Vedanta say to this kind of an unqualified mind? Do your duties legitimately in a dharmic way and take all of the results that come to you as Ishvara Prasada. This means they're a blessing, they're a gift of Ishvara. So through the course of time, the mind will start thinking more about Bhagavan, and then it's going to ask the question, well, what is Bhagavan? And that's going to lead into self-knowledge. So this means you give this kind of person some time, but you don't just go straight into knowledge because there's too many disconnections, too many false notions to address. So this means Arjuna, worry not, because there's 7 more chapters for opportunity to qualify your mind. We're only in chapter 11. Sanjaya uvacha ityarjunam vasudeva tathoktva swakam rupam darshayamasa bhuyaha ashwasayamasa cha bhitam enam bhutva punak saumyavapur mahatma.
Sanjaya said, having to spoken to Arjuna this way, the son of Vasudeva, Krishna, again showed his own form and consoled him, who was frightened, having once more become the Lord with a pleasing form.
Okay, so again, Bhagavan withdraws his form from Vishwarupa to a relatable avatara form. This is what Sanjay is describing. Now, the question is, what do you mean by withdrawing Vishwarupa? Because Vishwarupa means the universe. So there's no question of Vishwarupa arriving and then departing when it's withdrawn. Because if Vishwarupa departed, then there will be no chapter 12, there will be no world. You and I wouldn't be talking. So what does it mean to say Vishwarupa was withdrawn? It means that Krishna withdrew Divya Chakshuhu from Arjuna's Antahkarana because the mind simply couldn't handle it. For example, suppose grade 2 student in maths goes to grade 10 mathematics. What is the grade 2 student going to think? I don't understand this. Get me out of here. I would like to withdraw from this class. So the question is, what caused the student, the grade 2 student, to silently withdraw from the class? What is the cause? It's a question for you.
Lack of maturity?
Yeah, so this means the student can't help it. He wanted to see grade 10. He was so curious. It was a honeymoon, like, you know, there were adults there. It's so complicated. Like, wow, I'm in this class. But within 5 or 10 minutes, the student gets bored. They lose interest, what was initially interesting. Honeymoon's over. What happens next? Get me out of here. I want to withdraw. I want to find the exit. Okay, now I said the word Divya Chakshuhu. The question is, what is Divya Chakshuhu?
Divine intervention?
Again?
Higher awareness.
Okay, more expanded mindset. Okay, good.
Expanding our vision to see Ishvara in everything.
So it has to do with the mind. So this means the mind is not overpowered by the notion of me and mine. In other words, the higher the proportion of this me and mine, the more narrow-minded is my perspective of the whole. Now you say, what do you mean by that? Suppose that your relative, suppose you're out right now, and your relative is standing in front of a big mountain. And you focus the camera on my relative. Are you going to see the mountain? What happens to the mountain? It goes out of focus. And if your focus is on my understanding that the big picture is way more important than what is right in front of me, then what's going to happen to the person? They're going to equally go out of focus from your life. And you see in both sides. You know, some people that are just so unpresent, they're like somewhere else. That means the focus is what? On the big picture, but totally lost focus with world, with people, with family. For the rest of us, focus is entirely on the subjects, on objects, but then we lose big picture of the whole. two sides of the extreme. Or also in school, you've seen, and I remember this myself, you know, we used to do like these drama plays, you know, it was this theater, like drama, you were participating in some drama play. Do you remember that in school? And you had like some section that you did where you played the role. Now, what happened during that section where you were specifically meant to play the role? Your parents came only during that section. In other words, parent comes to see my child doing the act. Soon as my child is off the stage, parent leaves. What does this do? So this means the parent misses the entire Vishwarupa Darshanam of the total program. Why? Because of my son, my daughter. And then they go home and talk about this play as if they know everything about it. But they only know a short few minutes related to my son, my daughter. Ocean is in front of me, and I lie down on the sand. Big ocean, impossible to miss. And I'm stuck in my head, thinking about my life. My life. Oblivious to the entire ocean right in front of me. So it doesn't matter if I'm right there, I still miss the obvious. Why? Because of my and me. This is, what is Divya Chakshuhu? The absence of my and me, or at least the intensity has reduced. So this means as long as we hold on to this notion of mine and me, the mind continues living in its private little world. And that kind of mind is unable to accommodate the bigger picture because it is on two sides of the extreme, either the big picture or what's right in front of me. Both of them are Dvaitam. And what happens, what's the direct reflection of this in terms of living? It limits the person's cheerfulness. And that's why kids are naturally happy. Why are they happy? Because this notion of me and mine is still weak. But as we grow up, the me and mine starts to increase, it starts to strengthen. And thus, so does the cheerfulness reduce also. That's the only reason why children are naturally happy. Because this notion of me and mine is still in its maturity. So what is Divya Chakshuhu? Reducing me and mine. Arjuna Uvacha Drishtvedam Manusham Rupam Tava Saumyam Janardana Idanim Asmi Samvrtaha Sacheta Prakritin Gataha.
Arjuna said, seeing this pleasing human form of yours, Janardana, Krishna, now have become cheerful and restored to my original nature. Not only does Lord Krishna come back to his original form, the Gita also returns to its original meter. For the most part, the Gita is in Anustup, but ever since Arjuna began seeing the cosmic form, it has been in Tristup. Now the Anustup meter is restored. Krishna is now identifiable as a human being. Arjuna, seeing this human form that was so pleasing, Somya, addressing Krishna as Yaranana says, now I've collected myself. I am pleased and cheerful and have come back to my original disposition of mind. Previously, he was frightened and afflicted. Now, seeing this familiar form of Krishna, he is pleased.
Okay, this verse reminds us the inevitable outcome if we attempt to spiritually bypass or not address the relative person, the one that we all know so well since birth. Because even if Arjuna, we'll bring into Arjuna's case, even if he received the surrender blessing, his own lack of prior self-growth caused that very blessing to be taken away. Just like the child's lack of preparation caused him to say, I need to withdraw from the class. And what's more, even if Krishna, if his gift were to remain with Arjuna, it's still, that gift would not be enjoyable. So this means that you cannot cheat the natural process of evolution. There's no such thing as shortcuts. And any shortcut leads to disappointment, because Divya Chakshuhu, blessed by Krishna, led to what? Arjuna's disappointment. Why? Because it was unnaturally given to a mind that is not capable of receiving this vision or holding this vision. And now when this vision ends, what's the mind going to say? Oh, I'm not good enough. What of me? I don't deserve this. And it goes into a cycle of negativity. No one can cheat the system, because we're not the ones who created the system. The system already exists, and the system is called Dharma. So all one can do is align themselves with the laws of Dharma. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Sudur Darshamidam Rupam Drishtvanasi Yanmama Deva Apyasya Rupasya Nityam Darshana Kangshinaha.
Sri Bhagavan said, "You have seen this form of mine, which is very difficult to see. Even the gods always remain desirous of seeing this form."
Continue.
The form which Arjuna has just seen, Krishna tells him, is seen only with great difficulty, Sudarshana. It is not easily available for perception and is in fact almost impossible to see. Nevertheless, you are the one who has seen it. Even the gods have a constant desire to see this form. They are always praying for such a cosmic vision. You are lucky, Arjuna, because you have seen something that nobody else has seen. This is what Krishna wants to convey here.
So Arjuna, what you received wasn't because you deserve it, nor because you're qualified, but because of my grace, which came from your sincerity to know me. As I said last verse, there's no cheating. But Arjuna was sincere. He asked, I want to know you. I want to know the big picture. And because of the sincerity, because of Arjuna's willingness to abide to Dharma, instigated Bhagavan's grace. And Bhagavan's grace cannot be purchased. You cannot, say, give me Bhagavan's grace. It can only be received. How? By abiding by the principles of Dharma. And because of that, my grace has given you this Divya Chakshuhu. As I said, there's no cheating the system. The person can read the Vedas all they want. They can acquire all the Jnana Yoga in the world, all of the knowledge, read all the Upanishads. It means nothing. You still require Ishwara's grace for the knowledge to actually take place firmly. And there's no such thing as knowledge taking place like that. It is an ongoing process. So this means I constantly need Ishwara's grace. It's not just a one-off, because you still got a life to live, 20, 30, 40, 50 years to live. What of those years? Naham vedairna tapasa, na dane na nache jaya, shakya evam vidho drashtum, drishtavanasi mam yatha.
I cannot be seen in this form by study of the Vedas, nor by ascetic practices, nor by charity, nor by worship. You are the one who has seen me in this way. Here Bhagwan repeats what he has said before. Generally, repetition is considered a defect, but not in teaching. In this case, it is an introduction to the two very important verses that follow. Not by knowing the four Vedas, not by great ascetic practices, not by charity, and not even by ritual. Previously, he said yajna, which was Shrota, only includes those rituals we know from the Veda. Which he uses here can include samartha rituals like puja, etc. Even by all these various methods, I cannot be seen in this form. In the form that Arjun has been able to see him, no one else has seen in spite of great efforts. Through a repetition of various verses, this verse has been introduced here to provoke a question. If this vision is not attainable by all these great practices, yajna, dana, tapas, and so on, how then is it possible for one to see you?
Andre, you can't see the form by studying the Vedas, but you can by doing nididhyasana.
Yeah, which comes from studying the Vedas, of course.
Like you said about sincerity, so even if one is sort of not qualified, is not done any of these other practices, if we sincerely ask for something, then God does provide his grace.
Okay, so it poses a question. Why can't the mere study of Vedas, austerities, charity, worship, why can all of that not provide a complete understanding of the non-dual reality of Ishvara? So I'll ask you a question. Can mother's love be purchased? No. Okay. Does a child need to worship her, do austerities, read the Vedas to gain her love? Why not? Why none of that matters?
Unconditional.
Yeah, because it's priceless. You cannot purchase what is priceless. It cannot be attained because it is priceless. So in that same way, Bhagavan's priceless Vishwarupa cannot be purchased through sacrifices, through charity, through austerities, through yajnas. It cannot be purchased by any one particular action. Just like you cannot purchase mother's love through any particular action. Which is why bhakti, which leads to Vishwarupa, which leads to moksha, is not one particular sadhana. And this we will see in the next two verses, 54 and 55. And then it poses a question. If Vishwarupa is rare, then what is the means of being blessed by it? And then Krishna will now give the means in verse 54 and 55. Bhaktya tvananyaya shakyaha ahameva vidhorjuna Jnatum drashtum cha tattvena praveshtum cha parantapa.
Whereas Arjuna, the scorcher of enemies with devotion in which there is no other, it is possible that I can be known and seen in this form, and in reality can be entered into. Purely in keeping with the Shastras, there is no longer any magic here. It is possible to see me in this form, Krishna says, by the devotion that admits no other. Anyaya means without any other. Therefore, a devotion that does not imply any other thing is anyaya bhakti. What does it mean? This has been interpreted to mean that only by devotion to Krishna, not Rama or any other god, that you get this vision of Ishvara. By the meaning here is devotion in which there is only Ishvara, none other. Generally, we are committed and devoted to a number of things: money, one's partner, duty, and so on. And there is a little bit of devotion to God also. On a certain days of the week or at certain times of the day, we turn our attention towards God. Because our devotion is divided among various things, God has to wait for his turn. When money making and counting is over, when devotion to music and other things, Bhagwan gets his chance, the last chance. Then slowly a person finds that the little bit of devotion he had for the Lord has grown to cover a few more things. He finds that money also is Bhagwan. Wife is Bhagwan, children are Bhagwan, till finally the whole world is Bhagwan. This is Anyaya Bhakti. The devotion goes nowhere else except to Bhagwan.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Can you pick up any?
This is
Yes?
a bit confusing because initially we said that the only way to Ishvara, to Brahma is through Jnana Yoga.
Yeah.
So knowledge, so this is not knowledge, this is love.
Yes, so Jnana Yoga backed by devotion, because the expression of my knowledge directly reflects in my behavior, and that behavior is called bhakti. Just like when you have knowledge of your wife, who she is, what she is, how is that knowledge expressed with her? In a form of your devotion to her. So this means knowledge and devotion are not apart. This means the quality of my knowledge is directly reflected in my devotion, expressed as what I say, how I conduct myself, and how I generally transact. So in verse 54, Krishna wants to point out that the means to Vishwarupa Darshanam, which is a prerequisite to knowing the big picture, to capturing and holding the big picture, is what's called Anaya Bhakti. What is Anaya Bhakti? So as I mentioned earlier in verse 48, chapter 7 covers 4 levels of bhakti. Artaha, Artharthi, Jijnatsu, Jnani. 4 levels of bhakti. These 4 levels we can further classify into 3 stages. Stage 1 would be Artaha and Artharthi. This is how everyone starts. This means my devotion and worship to the Lord is for the sake of seeking worldly benefits, whether dharma, artha, or kama. This means Lord becomes the means and experiences and objects become the end. In the Upanishads, the stage 1 is called preyaha. You've heard of this word before, preyaha. It is also in the Bhagavad Gita called Sakama Bhakti. Stage 2. This is where Jijnatsu fits in. So through the course of time, in stage 1, which I just described, eventually the Bhakta's Viveka sharpens. And so they notice that this world contains what's called 4 doshas. Dosha means defects. So this means no matter what they transact with, it is by nature instilled with 4 doshas. Dukkha mishritatvam. This is whereby every experience is also mixed with sorrow, disappointment, and pain. Is this your experience? Every experience is also mixed with that. If it's not mixed with that, you just haven't arrived to the moment where you will see it is indeed mixed with that. It's just a matter of time. The second dosha is atrapti karatvam. This is dissatisfaction. Why? Because the fancy wears out. I was on the moon, you were on the moon, we were on the moon, and now the fancy has relieved itself, has calmed down. Now it's not so exciting anymore. And what does the person do then? They want more. Because we don't feel what we used to feel, I want more. Either by more quantity or asking for a longer duration. So the person goes on a hunt for more, better quality, just doesn't stop. Third dosha is anityatvam. This is whereby the person sees that no object leads to lasting fulfillment. Even if you say, yeah, but the object that I have, I'm actually developing a much more mature relationship. Our fulfillment is growing. Yeah, but that's still relative. Any moment that can change. That's the reality. Fourth dosha is bandha katvam. This means binding. In other words, I get addicted or enslaved or dependent on the object's presence. It all started fine. No, I'm independent. I don't need anyone. I don't need anything. 5 years later, I need this, I need that. I can't live without you. I need you. Or surround ourselves with these objects that we now depend on. So this means the Bhakta sees the reality of any experience has these 4 doshas. So acknowledging these 4 doshas, what happens? There is a reversal in perception. The world is no longer the end. The world is now the means. And what is the end? Bhagavan. And what happens when there's this perceptional change? This means directly the purpose of my life also changes. From solving ongoing daily situations, not that we shouldn't solve them, 2, simplifying life so that you spend more time, more effort on vichara. What is vichara? Inquiry, contemplation, pondering about, thinking of principles pertaining to Jiva, Jagat, and Parameshwaraha. How? By simplifying my life. Why? So that I have more time to think about these things. So initially, this Anaya Bhakti that is being spoken, it starts as indirect knowledge. This is called Paroksha Jnanam. There is an Ishvara who is the cause of the universe. That's called Paroksha Jnanam, indirect knowledge. In other words, you're speaking about it like a scholar, like a university. You know, when you go to university, it's all about things out there. It doesn't address the subject. Through the course of time, this Paroksha Jnanam changes to direct, immediate knowledge. This is called Aparoksha Jnanam. This means the essence of self, of I, and Ishvara is not two. There is only an apparent difference at the level of name and form. There's only an apparent difference between a wave and the ocean. And this is what you call stage 3. So what's the third stage? I talked about the 3 stages. The last stage is Jnani. This is whereby Parameshwaraha is neither the means nor the end. Remember stage 2? What was the end? Parameshwaraha. Now stage 3, he is neither the end nor the means. Because as long as he is either the means or the end, it means that he is apart from myself, the knower of him. So stage 3 is direct knowledge, called Aparoksha Jnanam. And this means that Ishvara is not the sought. I'm not seeking God here, but Ishvara is the very seeker, myself, Atma. The removal of this notion that I am different from Ishvara, this is what you call yoga, merger. What is merger? It is entirely a cognitive process in the Antahkarana. It's an understanding. Okay, verse 55.
Does it imply
Yes?
that then what's the concept of moksha? If we are already, is it just about knowledge then? Getting that knowledge?
Sure, okay.
So, because sort of you're implying that we are already free, we are just ignorant.
Yeah, okay, good, Kritika. So yes, we are already free, we just don't know it. So this means I need to remove my notions which deny me from the recognition that I am already free, that my truth and Ishvara's truth is not two. So before I know that knowledge, I think I am apart. Therefore, I live as a separate individual. And that reflects in the behavior. More for me, less for you. So we make this separate life for ourselves. So when we remove this beginningless notion, that is called moksha. What happens then? You're just living as a normal human being. You still got duties to attend to, still got a wife, still got husband, still got children, still got work. But the understanding in the Antahkarana, a cognitive process, is different. Yeah,
so we will take rebirth. It's just that we'll have the knowledge. Or
yes.
I'm just trying to understand the concept of moksha.
Yeah,
in the light of what you have talked about, then because it just seems like it's not a state, it's not some sort of position that we'll attain, it's simply knowledge. So then when we initially talked about moksha, it is about not having rebirth.
Okay, what does moksha mean? First of all, liberated while living. What does this mean? As I said, it is a cognitive understanding that I am already free. Now, what happens when that person who knows that dies? That's your question. The answer is they simply don't get reborn into another limited human body, because their understanding is I am not the wave, I am the water, and the water is the truth of the entire ocean. Therefore, what happens to a person who has moksha? What happens when they die? They as though merge with the water and the entire ocean. Whereas a person who hasn't attained moksha, only to their understanding that I am a separate individual, they get reborn as another wave. And they continue their life as an individual wave, interacting with other waves. So person who has moksha, meaning liberated while living, when they die, that's called videha mukti. And that means they're no longer going to incarnate or take on another name form, a limited name form called jiva. Why? Because they've understood that my reality is much more than just this individual body mind.
You say Videva Muktihi, and I heard also Jiva Muktihi.
Yeah.
So
okay.
It's just like Jiva Muktihi is the freedom when you are still alive, like this body still exists. So what's the difference about these two?
Yeah, cool. These are just the Sanskrit words. Moksha just means liberated while living. Jiva Mukti means I am liberated while living. Two different names for the same thing. And as Jivan Muktaha, the one who is liberated while living. So Jivan Muktihi, Jivan Muktaha, Moksha, all the same. Liberated while living. Yeah,
so Jiva Mukti will be like, I got all the knowledge, so I'm living my life and I have all the knowledge, so I'm Jiva Mukti. And then when I die, then I have Videva Mukti. That's it? No.
Yeah, so we just give that a name. Like what happens to this person who has, moksha? What happens when they die? They're called, they say, okay, now he has Videha Mukti. Now he's liberated or she's liberated. Yeah. So it's just names that the scriptures come up with, so you can kind of discern, give like what happens when this person dies, and you give the name for that. Mad karmakran mad paramaha mad bhaktah sangha varjitaha nirvairah sarva bhuteshu yah samam eti pandava.
The one who does all action for my sake, for whom I am paramount, who is devoted to me, free from attachment and free from enmity towards all beings, comes to me, Pandava brackets Arjuna.
So verse 55 is a seed verse for chapter 12, where the definition in chapter 12 and the how-to of bhakti will be thoroughly expounded. This means if your question is, how do I devote? What is devotion? What is this bhakti yoga? This practice? How does it look like in my life? What's involved? All of this is specifically thoroughly covered in chapter 12. So I'll give you a little teaser for chapter 12, so you just come back next year. Okay. Firstly, we'll ask, what is bhakti? Bhakti is a mental attitude born out of what? Understanding. Understanding of what? That the presence of Ishvara is everywhere in the form of time, space, objects, laws, and orders, which are always evident. When is time not evident to you? Never. In fact, you're only saying that in time. So, also, bhakti, as I said earlier, is not one specific sadhana. It is a range of sadhanas. In the Vedas, bhakti is divided into 3 categories: karma yoga, upasana, and jnana yoga. In chapter 12 next year, as I will see you, these 3 categories are further divided into 5 categories for the sake of specificity. So I will now tell you what the 3 categories are. I will tell you what the 5 categories are next year. The first category is karma yoga. So we'll ask, who is karma yoga for? The one who assumes that I am a doer, the cause. Now, if you assume that you're the doer, that also means I must also thus be the enjoyer, the sufferer, the effect. Therefore, I am a cause effect within my own private world. So karma yoga is for that one. What does karma yogi understanding involve? I will give you in a simple step-by-step fashion. Step 1. What does the karma yogi understand? When I do an action, karma, a result, karma palam, is generated, whether it is now or in the future. Step 2. You ask, what made that result possible as a result of my action? Answer, cause effect, time, other people, many laws and orders that are taking hold every second. Step 3, you ask, what one principle connects all of these variables together? Answer, presence of all knowledge, all power, called Ishvara. Step 4, you make a conclusion. Therefore, I dedicate all of my actions to the feet of the Lord, because it is all possible because of him alone. And whatever results come, whether favorable or unfavorable, they're also only because of the presence of the Lord. Therefore, the results are taken as Ishvara Prasada. What is Ishvara Prasada? I understand that this result, which I'm now experiencing, is just one possibility within the grand order. Therefore, this 4-step understanding of karma yoga is also bhakti. Why is it bhakti? Because it modifies your responses and your attitudes towards events. Category number 2, upasana. What is upasana? Various forms of mental meditations. That means meditations which make use of the mind. Dhyana. For example, Kriya Yoga, Tantra, Raja Yoga, Kashmir Shaivism, Ashtanga Yoga, Raja Yoga, Hatha Yoga. Now, what's the context of upasana in relation to category number 1, Karma Yoga? Karma Yoga is suitable for an extroverted mind. That means the mind that is always looking outwards. It is too impatient to, or too undisciplined to look inwards. Well, I don't have time to look inwards, just busy, busy, busy. Ultimately, that karma yogi comes to a certain understanding. He or she realizes that God cannot be found outside. He has to be within. Therefore, the personality slowly graduates from extroversion of a karma yogi into introversion of an upasana yogi. What happens then? That person who is now introverted becomes a detective, not of the external world, talking about worldly events, what other people said, what they're thinking about, but turns the attention inwards on one's own thoughts as though one's own psychologist, looking at one's own inner mental processes. And then he or she starts to manage them using techniques. Thus, upasana is techniques. Stage 3, jnana yoga. This is the final stage. What does this involve? It involves the study and contemplation of Shastra under the guidance of an acharya. What is the objective? The objective is to reconcile contradictions pertaining to reality. How do I reconcile all of these seemingly present contradictions? I then go to an acharya who reconciles that. All of these 3 forms are bhakti, and they're investigated in chapter 12. Therefore, what are we going to cover in chapter 12? Karma yoga, upasana, jnana yoga. Okay, now moving on to the actual verse 55. I gave you a teaser, end of teaser. Krishna says, devotee who reaches me has certain qualities. Question is, what qualities are they? He first says, mat karma krit. This means this devotee performs actions for the sake of the Lord. What does this sound like? Karma yogi. I just explained what karma yogi is. Question. What does it mean to say he or she performs actions for the Lord? It means your actions are keeping with Dharma, because Dharma is the moral code of God. Therefore, how do I abide by, or how do I live in accordance with God? By living in accordance with Dharma, because he's the one that sets the moral code. What does this mean? It means I suspend, or you suspend your personal biases and do what is right for the greater good. suspend personal biases. I spoke about this last week. Remember the judge? The son walks in, a criminal, and the judge is his father. What does the judge have to do? Put aside his or her, if it's a female, emotions, and make the call. Put the man in jail, even if he or she is my son. Why? Because if I release him on the streets, he will continue endorsing adharma, hurting others. And what is more important, my son or dharma? Dharma. Therefore, the person makes no compromises. Of course, now when I say this, this is also subject to, it's not black or white. For example, if someone takes a hiding in your house and they say, the cops, the robbers are after me, please hide me. And the cops or the robbers, they knock on your door and they say, is he or she in there? You're not going to say, yeah, please, come in the bedroom. You're going to obviously lie. So it's not a black or white process. Or same thing with a surgeon. A surgeon doesn't just, cut open. That is technically adharma. That's himsa. But why is the surgeon doing that? To save the patient. So this means dharma is not subject to black or white interpretation. Okay, anyone else got any examples of abiding by dharma? For example, in a family, right? What happens if you don't punish your son for irresponsible behavior or your daughter? As an adult, what are they going to do? They're going to advertise that which is unethical. So this means if I put my love first, I go, no, they're my son, it's my daughter, so I don't hurt them. Don't be easy on them. What am I actually doing? I'm endorsing adharma. That's going to create a big troublemaker when they grow up, and that's also come back to the parents. So this means I need to put my dharma first.
Andre, like Meenaji had asked the previous session as well,
yeah.
And a lot of things are not black and white.
Yeah.
And despite our best intentions to follow dharma and to do the right thing, we might end up taking up, making the wrong choices.
Yeah.
So how is it that we know that we are doing the right thing? You said that we would get, in terms of the result being we being happy or unhappy, one way to look at it.
Yeah.
But if I think about it, then it's just about perspective sometimes, because at one point in time, what I might feel is making me unhappy could be a source of happiness 2 days later.
True.
So to say that I might, the result of my action bringing happiness or unhappiness to me is sort of an indication whether I did the right thing or not. It is all very abstract, and it's very difficult for me at least to wrap my head around whether I am doing something which is according to dharma and what is not according to dharma. There is no guide I can look at, this is my situation and I should do this.
Yeah.
How can an ordinary person think about doing the right thing?
Okay, excellent question. Someone want to contribute to this? How does an ordinary person... Yes, please.
Yeah, look, I've got a very practical problem that relates directly to that, and it requires a little bit of explanation. Mm-hmm. Right now, there's a dog barking next door, and has done for 2 years. And I have spoken to the woman ever so politely, said g'day, and done it in a really respectful kind of way. Now, I've done it 3 times now. So my point of view is this: the dog shouldn't be barking, not because he's upsetting me, but because the dog is in some kind of distress. But that's my interpretation. Dogs bark for good reasons, not so good reasons. But the issue for me is, am I in the process of, applying dharma by firstly being patient and then delivering the killer blow, so to speak, by going to the council and saying, listen, I've tried this, I've tried that. So it's a very practical issue for me. And it's a little my little test, I think, of understanding what dharma is.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what to do. I'm not asking for advice. I'm having to work this out for myself. But it is situational. It appears to be situational, but ultimately it's not, I suppose.
Yeah, even at the court, when Krishna came to negotiate, and offer, a peace plan to the Kauravas, to not go ahead with the war. What did Krishna do? He offered 5 options. He said, here's, you can have, give them back their entire state, and then give them 5 houses, and then 5 villages, 5 houses, 1 house with 5 rooms. And so even the Lord himself, he couldn't actually convince Duryodhana to follow through. Now, what to say of us? Right? So this means that even if we try to do our best, right, we still don't exactly know how it's going to work out, first of all. But it doesn't. So does this mean that Krishna is supposed to go back and go, oh, I'm not good enough. The Lord of the universe is not good enough at persuading. I'm a failure. So what did Krishna? He went back and he didn't think about it again. He said, I've done what I could. And several options, they all failed. And now I will now do the, as you say, killer blow. Maybe it's go to the council, right? And, deliver a war or something. So this means that at any moment, all you really can do is apply what you can apply, but there's no guarantee that you will know whether it's going to turn for your favor or, it's going to actually cause you harm. Because suppose now you go to the council and now the owner goes, okay, so obviously that was him, because he spoke to me earlier. So now I'm going to retaliate. That can also happen. Right? So, and these are, so again, as Kriti was saying, it's not black or white. We actually don't always know, but the most we can do is we do receive feedback nevertheless. And the feedback usually comes in the form of, okay, now is my life, is it in better quality? Is it generally better? Or is it kind of like going down and, emotions are like out of order and, I'm finding I'm not so enthusiastic anymore? Or is my life generally brighter, generally more cheerful, generally more enthusiastic? So this means that all of our actions, we do receive a feedback. And based on that feedback, we can now then ask, okay, what now? And every time you say what now, that's exactly where you have the option of applying Dharma again. Okay, so all of these examples we mentioned is called Swadharma. What is Swadharma? Everyday thoughts and actions are in the name of ethics, decency, consideration, fairness. Of course, these words are all now questioned, like what is decent, what is, considerate, what is not considerate, what is ethical. So this is, obviously coming through time, and we'll talk about more about this in chapter 13. So the original question was, what does it mean to say, perform actions for the sake of the Lord? I gave you perspective 1. Perspective 2. It means that knowing all time-bound experiences, every experience is time-bound, it resolves into one cause. And for that reason, I convert all of my preyaha, I told you what preyaha means, sakama bhakti, in other words, artha kama, I convert all of that into shreyaha. Shreyaha means anaya bhakti. What do you do with a decorated, beautiful chair in your house? You do everything. You put, nice jingles and bells and whistles on it. You add colors on it. You add flowers. You add fragrances. You add all of this onto your beautiful cardboard chair in the house. But what is the one thing that you don't do with that cardboard chair? you say that you don't sit on it, right? Okay.
You don't sit on it. Yeah.
So what happens if I sit on it? It obviously falls. It does not support me. So this means no matter how beautiful the world looks, I never stop there. I see that ultimately I cannot depend on the world because it is dependent on a much larger reality, that is Ishvara. So this means I put my dependence on Ishvara and not on the world. We're not saying now dismiss the world. We're just saying don't lose sight of what belongs where. If I lose sight, then I say, okay, the world is one big chair. Let's sit everywhere. And each time it leads to disappointment because I fall. And I go, oh, it's okay. I've got one more chair. And I sit, I fall again. So what's the original question? The devotee who reaches me has certain qualities. The second quality is mat paramaha. This means this bhakta refuses to get too involved in experiences. Too involved. I'm not saying they refuse to get involved, but too involved, because they know that every experience that I get too involved in is bound to carry a trail of relatable thoughts, even when that experience ends. And what's the mind they're going to do? It's going to focus on those thoughts. Now, suppose the mind is doing this all its life. Is it ever going to get time to focus on the ultimate goal? Therefore, the Bhakta protects his or her mind. Intentionally says, no, I'm not going to watch this movie with violence because I know what's going to happen once the movie ends. And I'm going, oh, it's such a good movie. When I go to sleep, I'm going to have nightmares. Tomorrow, I'm going to have thoughts related to the movie, and those thoughts are going to influence my behavior, which is going to take me off course. So you intentionally protect your mind because the mind is like a sponge. It just sucks it up, and then it becomes whatever it has been given. What other qualities does this person who reaches me have? Mat bhaktaha. This means the bhakta is devoted to Ishvara, to me, says Krishna. So how do you know whether the person's knowledge is truly in a form of understanding, which expresses as devotion? You just look at their enthusiasm towards the scriptures. Are they looking at this one time? Okay, cool. Yep, I'm awareness. Thank you very much. Goodbye. Or they're just so hungry. More, please. More. I'm so enthusiastic about Vedanta. Just tell me more. I want to know about the big picture. They always want more. This means they're hungry for their enthusiasm is 10 out of 10. Therefore, the more you have knowledge, or the firmer your knowledge is about Vedanta, the more enthusiastic you are. So this is a direct gauge of whether this is just intellectual or whether this is actual, whether you actually are one with this knowledge. Sangha varjitaha. The Bhakta's mind is relaxed about objects and people. It says here, free of attachment, but I'll explain what that means in a different way. What does this mean to be free of attachment? It means the Bhakta refuses to place excessive meaning onto things. How do you not place excessive meaning onto things? You tell me.
By not thinking about it again and again and again.
Okay, definitely. Yeah, because a thought kind of, reinforces a new thought, it just keeps building up.
Indifference, more like a witness.
Okay, can you be just a witness to someone robbing your wife?
No.
Are you going to be, okay, so this means I need a solution that applies across the board, everywhere, real life. Because I don't buy into this, be a witness, just stand apart, watch everything happening. It doesn't work in real life like that. Even though I understand what you mean, there is also a place for that, absolutely. Okay, I'll ask you a question. How do you place excessive meaning onto things? What would you have to do to place excessive meaning onto things?
See them as being real.
Okay, how do you give reality to something?
Strong emotions associated with that thing or...
Okay, good. Okay, and what caused you to develop strong emotions to that thing?
Desire.
And why did you have desire towards the thing in the first place?
Because you're not fulfilled. It's something to make you complete.
Okay.
Separateness. You're separate.
Statement is, this Bhakta refuses to place excessive meaning onto things. What do I mean by when I say things? Anything, including your own thoughts, including your own emotions, including your own life, and spouses, and children, and families. Now, how do you do this? Okay. What happens if for example, you see something that is shiny, like a car, or a man sees an attractive lady, and they go, oh, I need that. Why do they respond so quickly? What makes them respond so impulsively and go, oh, I need that, I want that? Without even knowing anything about it, they say, I want that.
Vasanas.
Yeah, okay, vasanas. So their compulsions force them to put lots of value. But why do I put so much value on something that I don't even know about? I haven't even said hello to her because I'm looking at the surface only. I'm only having 1/5 of the information. Eyes, sight, that's all. I stop there. 1/5 of the information, that's it. That's good enough for me. So in other words, how does the person put excessive meaning onto things? By looking at the surface and not taking time to inquire into the nature of that object, which I find fancied with.
That's a lack of viveka.
Lack of viveka, exactly. In other words, I'm not applying my God-given gift to inquire what is the nature of this. Hey, wait a minute. She's actually someone's daughter. She also has aspirations, has sufferings in life, working hard, probably going to get home and look at something. She's also trying to find ways to be happy. So this means I'm now already starting to inquire into this object. Whereas before, oh, skin, need it. In other words, I stop at surface, therefore I put excessive meaning onto an object which it doesn't inherently deserve. Okay, what else does this cause? It causes less attachment to certain outcomes because you've looked into that object and now you understand, hey, it may work out according to my expectations or it may not, because I don't control the infinite amount of variables that are going on right now in the field. So it is not fair to expect that they act exactly according to how I want them, because they're also a human being. They also have their own values, you know, ways of looking at the world. So I need to also respect that. Also means that the more you immerse yourself in Vedanta or any kind of subject matter, the smaller your world becomes. Did you notice that? Such a small world. Why is the world so small when it's actually growing every day by the population numbers? Why is the world getting smaller? Because in reference to the big picture, I know where I stand. If I don't know where I stand in reference to the big picture, then I want it all. I want to be the president. I want to, you know, conquer the whole world. Why? Because I don't know where I stand specifically in relation to the big picture. Therefore, the more you know who you are, what you are, where your strengths and weaknesses lie, the smaller your world gets. And then finally, nirvairaha. So this Bhakta's personality is free from hostility towards animals, insects, and human beings. Okay, so I'm never supposed to kill a mosquito. I'm never supposed to walk on an ant. This is not what we're saying. We're just saying general behavior is I don't want to hurt, so I prevent hurt wherever I can. How are we supposed to become free of hostility towards unethical acts of other people? Because when I say hostility, this means also thoughts, hostile thoughts.
Just by thinking that everything is Ishvara.
Definitely, yep, okay. That's okay, so keep the big picture in mind.
And second, by acknowledging the fact that everyone behaves according to their conditioning and the three gunas that are dominant in them.
Excellent, exactly what I was gonna say. So, everyone, as Meena was saying, helplessly, okay, whether it's helpless or not, you know, free will, but we'll say everyone acts according to their nature. So I'll ask you a question. Can you blame a mosquito for biting you?
No.
Okay, Goknor's got a problem with mosquitoes. Okay, why can you not blame a mosquito for biting?
That's the nature of the mosquito.
Nature of the mosquito. I mean, it's programmed to do according to its nature, as Meena was saying. In that same way, the human being is programmed to act according to his or her nature. Samskaras, when I say programmed. Now, I said earlier, wait a minute, mosquito is programmed, but the human being has free will. Now, are most people thinking, oh, I've got free will, let me exercise my... Are most people thinking like that? No, they're just going on by a normal program. What I've done yesterday, I simply repeat today. So this means most don't have time to contemplate because, you know, it's a busy life. You're doing something for society, so you just get involved and you don't think about a bigger vision. You don't think about free will, where your power lies. You just end up being a human being who's doing a certain activity. So this means most human beings, as everyone is, naturally act according to their nature. This is why, for example, I think I said the story once. I was friends with two very good people, and I stayed with them for 4 months, and they were a couple. And she was extremely, into conscious of health. Like, I'm a health woman, and what you eat, what goes inside your body, when to sleep, how long to sleep. All of this was just health conscious. And she was always guiding, him. They were both my friends. What to eat, and don't smoke too much, and don't drink alcohol too much. And also I was like, okay, they're working together very well. And they split up a few months later. Now, obviously I was still their friend, so I knew what was happening on both sides. And I came back to his house, and he's smoking in front of me. He's, drinking alcohol. He's talking about drugs. I'm like, Wait a minute, what happened to you, man? You were like an angel when you were with her, and now you've gone back to your nature doing the same old things that you're always doing. In other words, the person cannot help themselves but to act according to their nature if they don't spend time in vichara, contemplation, reflection, pondering, consideration. So this means if I don't apply inquiry in regards to my life and my behaviors, there is no doubt the person will fall back into their old habitual patterns. Why? Because you got a whole huge arena of samskaras that are constantly coming forward. This is called prarabdha karma. So this means we have to be consciously alert. Sa mam eti. Such a person surely attains me. So the ones with all of these qualities surely attains me. I grace him or her with a guru who provides jnanam, jnana yoga, self-knowledge. Because unless Lord graces, then the seeker simply won't know which person has knowledge or doesn't have knowledge. What does the seeker know? To them, it's all, everyone looks the same. Everyone's either worthy of listening to or everyone's suspicious. So this means that one needs to be graced by the Lord himself, because the seeker who's sincere doesn't know. That's why Lord's grace is also important. And how does the Lord's grace, how do we get Lord's grace? We said earlier on in the session. Do you remember?
Sincerity.
Sincerity, good. Sincerity in my humility in wanting this knowledge to fructify. So in a nutshell, let's conclude verse 55. Question is, what to do to invoke his grace? Because his grace leads to moksha. So what do I do to invoke his grace? Answer is, using all of the words, consider Ishvara as a supreme goal. Mat parama. Love wholeheartedly. Mat bhakta. Serve enthusiastically through all actions. Mat karma krit. Refuse to categorize experiences into favorable and unfavorable. Why? Because by doing so, I constrict the flow of love towards the world. I put everything into boxes. Instead, as I said earlier, attempt to inquire into the nature of this object or the person. So instead of saying, what a power-hungry politician, rather say, I wonder what kind of a childhood this person must have had in order to keep doing what they're doing now. This causes you to learn about humanity rather than to put labels with a full stop, which causes no learning. Also, likes and dislikes can only go towards finite objects. So this means if I'm constantly liking and disliking and going to this, what I like, what I don't like, then what am I denying? That which is infinite, because likes and dislikes can only go towards finite objects. But what am I seeking? That which is infinite. Finally, by managing your likes and dislikes, you cultivate a heart free of attachments, sangha varjita, and hatred, nirvaira. And that concludes chapter 11. Om Tat Sat iti Shrimad Bhagavad Gita Tsu Upanishatsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Shri Krishna Arjuna Samvade Vishwarupa Darshana Yogo Nama Ekadashodhyayaha. Brahman is the only reality. Thus ends the 11th chapter called Vishwarupa Darshana Yoga, having the topic of the vision of cosmic person in the Bhagavad Gita, which is in the form of a dialogue between Shri Krishna and Arjuna, which is the essence of the Upanishads, whose subject matter is both the knowledge of Brahman and yoga, the means of attainment.